Welcome to the second video of 3 videos in the Breezy Bunting Quilt Along, also calling it the Use Your Roll Quilt Along. In this video, we are going to talk about in detail how to decide which of these strips from your roll of fabric to use with your chosen background fabric. I'll go through and I will show you, I will open this and sort it with you so you can see my thought process of choosing prints, which ones I want to use and where I want to place them. I'll go over some basic cutting, and then the block is the same block over and over again, so I'm not going to walk you through all the steps of constructing the block, but there are 2 tips that I have to share with you that I think will make the construction process for you a lot simpler. If you don't have it already, grab the pattern in our shop. It's shop.polkadotchair.com, and let's get sewing. So let's go ahead and bust open this roll of fabric. You will need your pattern, which you can get through the link in the description of the video or at shop.polkadotchair.com. Print it out and then gather your supplies. Decide what you want to use for your background fabric and decide which 2.5-inch roll of fabric that you want to use. I am using Ballerina Pink Sparkler from Riley Blake, which is one of my basics with Riley Blake, and I am using the Summer Picnic 2.5-inch roll. This is a line of mine from, I think, 2022, 21. You can still find it on Etsy, I checked. But the idea of this quilt along is to use something that you already have to make the quilt, so I thought that I would follow suit and use something that I had and I haven't used yet either. I actually haven't had a chance to make a quilt from Summer Picnic just because you get busy with other projects, and so I'm kind of excited to have this for myself. The first thing you need to do is you need to sort your strips. There are a couple of different steps to this process. I have outlined all of the sorting strips section on page 3 under prep. I give you a few different examples of different ways to use the strips in your roll depending on which background fabric you have. Since each one of these rolls has a different number of prints, most of them have 42 pieces. This one has 40. You might need to, like if you have a manufacturer that has a smaller one, you just need something with at least 40 strips. But you'll notice like some of these pieces are too close in color to my background fabric, so when I create the blocks with them, they're not going to show up. So that is what you want to do first, is just do a quick sort with your fabric. Well, I like to go ahead and, for this portion, I'll usually lay out my background fabric just so I kind of have a good idea of what the fabric's going to look like together. So first thing, open your roll, which honestly this is always one of my favorite parts. I love unrolling these. Alright, so alright, we are unrolled. Almost all of jelly rolls, roly poly, whatever you want to, whatever it's called based on the manufacturer, contain 1 to 2 prints of each print in a fabric collection. A fabric collection is just a collection of fabrics that a designer has made that coordinate with each other in color and print and scale, so you kind of takes the guesswork out of mixing and matching fabrics for you. Very quickly, make 2 piles. You want a pile of strips that there's 1 print of. So there's 1 of these, and then there's 2. So then, keeping your 2 strips together, make a pile of strips that have 2 strips of the same print and color of fabric. As you work, notice if there are any prints that you think will not work with your background fabric, and I'm going to run into a couple of them. So here's the first one. This is more of an apricot, and then this is more of a pinky peach, but I think that they're too close in tone, and I think from far away that these prints will get lost in the quilt. So I am not going to use these. I'll save them. I might do a scrappy binding on this quilt. We'll see. I'll set them aside. Same with this. It's the same pink. I think it's just going to blend in too much to the background with these strips. So I'll put these aside. So I'm going to count. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 individual strips. And then you want to count sets of strips. A set of strip is 2 strips of the same print. The pattern, just make sure, because this when I went back to make this quilt again myself, I actually messed myself up. Make sure that you are counting sets. A set is 2 strips. The math here can get a little confusing, but it makes it easier if you count the set of 2 strips as a set and count sets, not individual strips. So these 2 strips will yield 3 blocks for me. You'll get 1 block cut from the 12.5 here, 1 block cut from the 12.5 here, and then I have 1 12.5 inch piece here and 1 12.5 piece here, which will make a 3rd block. So count how many sets that you have. So I'm going to count my sets. So I have 13 sets. 13 sets of 2 strips. So from these 13 sets of 2 strips each, and I could do the math in my head, but considering I'm doing this on video and I'll probably forget, I'm going to use my handy dandy telephone calculator. So I've got 13 strips sets, and I can get 3 blocks from each of these, which gives me a total of 39 blocks. Then I can get 7 blocks from these 7 strips, because you get 1 block per individual strip. So 39 plus 7 equals 46, which leaves me short 4 blocks. So I have a couple of choices here. I mentioned on the pattern that you may need some additional fabric, depending if your background fabric is too close to your roll fabric. So honestly, if I could use these strips, I would have enough fabric that I need. But I need to come up with 4 more blocks. So I'm going to use some blender fabric and some fabric from my stash. I also have a lot of this fabric, so I will probably cut a little bit of that. So that's why I suggest in the pattern that you do a 1/4 yard extra. So to get 4 more blocks, I'm going to need, I'll just use the same fabric. So let me help you do the math. So if I use the same fabric for these 4 additional blocks, I can get from 2 strips, I can get 3 blocks. So I'll cut 2 strips 2.5 inches by the width of fabric. That will give me 3 blocks, and then I can cut 1 more strip 2.5 by width of fabric. This can be the same print as this, or if you want, you can use a second print. So that will give me my additional 4 blocks that I need to complete my quilt. Are you completely confused? Honestly, I think the best thing to do is to follow the directions here, go slowly, use a post-it note, scratch pad. The biggest thing to remind you, like I said before, is just remember from each set of 2 strips, you can get 3 blocks. You don't get 3 blocks from each strip. You get one, for the most part, you get 1 block from each strip, but when you have 2 strips of the same print, you can get a half block from each of the strips, which gives you an entire 3rd extra block, if that makes any sense at all, which I think it does. So follow those directions, and then come after you've got your strips sorted out. So I've got this, and then I'll go ahead and cut 4 more with the fabric strips from another fabric from this print to mix in with it. You want to cut the pieces. You need to cut from the selvage edge out, 12.5 to here, and then you don't have 12.5 here, but because of the fold, you can take the extra piece, press it, and you will get a third 12.5-inch piece. Then from all of your leftovers, and you will have a lot of leftovers, you need to cut 50 2.5 by 4.5-inch strips. So I have a bunch cut because I've pre-cut some of these for the pattern. These cut more than you need. Like honestly, I might even use some other random fabric I have that's a blender that matches, because you want enough choices that when you're coming to the point of the quilt where you're matching up your bottom and your top block pieces, that you have a lot of variety. And I will show you on the quilt what I'm talking about. The strips that you're cutting are used for this portion of the block. These are the 12.5-inch strips. You're going to sew the triangle to the bottom. You're going to create the triangle on the bottom in the piecing steps that come next, and then you're going to sew a piece to the top. So this is what all of those 12.5-inch strips that we're cutting from these pieces are. With the leftover pieces, which you should have quite a bit, you are going to cut these pieces. And the reason I suggest cutting more than you need is so that you can have as much variety as possible when it comes to matching prints. I like to have contrast, so like this polka dot, blue polka dot print looks nice with this pink flag print because it's got the blue in there. You get a lot of contrast, so I like to have the pop and contrast, which makes the quilt more interesting. Other thing to note, depends on which way the manufacturer has printed the fabric on the selvage, your fabric may run sideways when it's in the completed block. As you can see, this fabric is running sideways. It doesn't bother me because this is a large quilt. There's a lot of blocks on it. It's busy because there's a lot of different prints. It doesn't bother me. If it bothers you, in the sorting portion at the beginning, sort those pieces out and don't use them if you don't want to. You will just need to substitute in some other fabric like a blender, like a polka dot or a stripe or a texture or something from your stash. It's a scrappy quilt, so feel free to mix in other prints and colors to kind of help you stretch out your existing pieces in your roll. If you want to make sure you have exactly what you want for all your pieces, then purchase 2 pre-cut rolls. But I think that you'll end up with a lot of extra fabric if you do it that way. So your step 1 is to sort and cut all of your pieces of fabric. I had mentioned before that we were going to have the sorting and prep on 2 different videos, but I think I'm going to move the piecing steps to another video. I'll still release it on the same day. So if you're finishing up this video, look for the second video, which is your tips for piecing your blocks together.